Hello, my name is Hakon and welcome back to my channel where today I intend to tell you a little bit about how I created this video effect that you see right now. I get a lot of questions about this now after I posted a little clip from Blade Runner a few weeks ago that used this particular effect. And I have promised in many comments that I will create a video showing how it is done, and this is it. This is that video. The way I do it is one of many possible ways of doing it. This is the method that I have devised myself and that makes sense to me and that I enjoy working with. If you learn something from this, if you create your own videos, for instance, using my method, I would appreciate it, of course, if you post a link on that video to my channel or to this video or one of my other PETSCII videos. And of course, if you like this video, please like, share, comment and subscribe and join me on Patreon if you feel that is worth something extra to you as well. So with that being said, I'll move on to my screen and I will show you how I do this. Right, so here we are on my desktop, and in the middle of my desktop I've placed the 4 icons of the pieces of software that I personally use to create this effect. Now there's nothing automatic about why I chose these. They each have a function, but it doesn't have to be these specifically. So you don't have to use these. I'm using these because I just happen to have them available to me when I wanted to create this effect. The main program that is used and the main converter of images and video into a PETSCII look is mosaic. That is an image mosaic program. This just doesn't look very exciting on its own now. And the way it works is you give it an image library, and that library is then treated as mosaic tiles. And then you give it a bigger image that you want to convert into a mosaic of those tiles, and then it tries to match color, shade, and contour to the tile set that you provided. You may have seen this effect in adverts, for instance, on billboards, where you have an image that is made up of smaller images. Usually the smaller images are photos, and usually the photos are photos that are relevant to the bigger image as well. So this means that you have a picture that can look quite nice. This looks a bit like a mosaic picture, but then you move closer, you can actually see the constituent mosaic tiles as each their own image as well, and that can be quite an interesting effect because it looks different at a distance from up close. And that is the program that I use to create PETSCII as well, because you can give it an image library that consists of the PETSCII characters. It doesn't have to be all the characters, actually. You can choose yourself which ones to include or exclude. And you can do it in different colors if you like, but the principle is exactly the same. You give it an image library, and then you give it an image to create as a mosaic from that library, and it can do it. So I'll just very quickly show you now. So I open a library first of all, and I've got one called Basic Blue, and I open an image, and I'll just do one still now from the, just click apply and render. So this is a still from the introduction to this video, and I haven't done any adjustments or grading or cropping on it yet, but just to show you very quickly how this works. So that is the main program for creating this effect. I'm just gonna minimize that. But first of all, before you get to that stage, there are a few things you need to do. First of all, you need to create the image library, because this does not work with text. This is not an ASCII video effect. Right, so here we are in Adobe Illustrator, and the reason I like using Illustrator for this kind of thing is that it has a very good glyphs panel. So it's easy for me to create all the characters because they are right here on the side, so I can create them easily. So the way you find the glyphs panel is going to Windows, Type, Glyphs, and it should come up over here. And otherwise I've got an artboard here that is 8 by 8 pixels, and the reason that shows 8 by 8 pixels is because this is a quirk with Adobe Illustrator, that something strange can happen when you try to export this now, and I'll show you that. So if I go to export, I'll just do save for web, you can see there's a tiny little character on the middle of the screen there. I'll just increase the size of that to 1600%, and you can see that we've got an extra line on the left and an extra line on the top, and the whole thing has been pushed down out of the square, which isn't very good. This happens also if you have a bigger artboard. You also get these extra lines there. And the way I've found around it is to create the artboard to be 8 by 8 pixels, and then when I increase the size to 64 by 64 on the output here on export screen, the lines disappear. Another thing to be aware of, I'll just put it back now to 8 now so you can see it quite well, is that the export dialog here in Illustrator has often got the art optimized set as default, and that is trying to anti-alias the image, and the same with type optimized as well. It's trying to anti-alias the image, whether it's an art piece or a type piece. None is of course what we want, because we want to see nothing but those two colors in a finished image. So I'm going to save that as 64 by 64 pixels, and I'm going to save it as a JPEG at full quality, like so. For my particular image program, of course PNG would have been ideal, but my Mosaica does not accept PNGs as tiles. It accepts JPEGs and bitmap files, but a 100% quality JPEG is usually, there shouldn't be any artifacts that would make that a problem. So I'm going to save it like that. I'm going to cancel it now because I've already done this before, and there we are. So that's how I make the tiles one by one. And there's a little trick here as well. If you want to use this method, this process, to create codes that you can use later to recreate the images that you make on the computer now, if you want to recreate it on a Commodore 64 on the real hardware, or on an emulated Commodore 64 or Commodore machine, you can name these tiles with a character code that is the one you need in your program to create that character on the screen. And I'll get back to how that will work for you later, and how you can use that data to create images on an actual machine later. You know what, I may as well show you right away how I do this. So this is going to be the geekiest bit of the tutorial. If you're not interested in creating images on a Commodore 64, you may skip this bit, but I'm going to show it anyway. I've opened Mosaica and I've got an image that has been rendered. And now the thing is, in order for us to recreate this image on a Commodore 64, you need the character codes for the image, so that you can put those character codes into a program on the Commodore 64 to recreate that image. So if you have named your individual image tiles with the right character code that can easily be turned into a character code on the Commodore 64, this is how you can get those numbers out of Mosaica. So you click on export, And a save type is JPEG by default, but if you go into here and you actually can select text list as a save type. So I'll click save as. I'm just going to use the default now on the desktop, and we get a text file over here. I'll just open that, and first you have the row. So row 1, that's the top row, and then you have column 1 to 40, and then you get the second row. So this is actually the correct order as well of images for us to, so it's from the top left and going right, and then the next line, etc. And if you have named your individual character image files with the number that corresponds to the value you need to put into the screen memory address on the Commodore 64, it's easy to go into this text file and remove everything but those numbers, so you get a list of all the numbers you need to put into the screen memory locations. And of course, this is something that can be more or less automated for someone who knows what they're doing. It certainly is easy to pass this text file so that you only left with only the numbers. It's something you can do in Microsoft Word, for instance, with a find and replace dialog, and you can do it other ways as well. And then you can, if you have a list of 1000 numbers that correspond to the character values, that's you, that is the image, and you can use that in the Commodore 64. So that's a single image, that's how you do that. But if you go into the batch mosaic now, so now I've created just a new folder called JPEGs2, just not to mix them up now. And I'm going to put the result in PETSCII2, just so I don't mix up my results. And in the batch export dialog here, or the batch processing dialog, you have an option called additional save mosaic to text. So I'm going to click on that, and we click on mosaic all, and it will start batch processing just like it does. But in addition to, I'm just going to go into PETSCII2 now. So in addition to the image file, it's going to create a text file as well. And that is the text file with the file name for the tiles used in each of the frames. So if you figure out some clever way of processing these text files, you can have all the character codes needed to recreate the images and the video indeed on a Commodore 64. And this mosaic can actually create those for you. Right. So that is the end of the geekiest bit of this tutorial. I'm not going to tell you how to do that, because I'll leave that to whoever wants to try it out to sort out. It's not something that I will do, because I'm not a programmer. I don't know enough about the Commodore 64 to do that myself. I have been able to just do as a test one time. I took one image and I recreated it on a Commodore 64 emulator in BASIC, because I knew how to do that. And I had to repass it a little bit because of the character values not being exactly compatible with what I needed for creating it on the screen, but it wasn't a big problem. So I can do it in BASIC for a single image, but I don't know how to do this in machine code. I don't know how to do it for a movie, but I'm sure somebody else knows how to do that and would be able to figure it out with this method. Right, that said, I'll get back to the intended flow of the tutorial now. And that was pretty much all I wanted to show you in Adobe Illustrator. So once that is done, once you have the whole set of characters that you want, you can go into Mosaic again, and here we have an option of creating a new library. So I'm going to click on New Library, and as you can see, it doesn't accept PNGs, except bitmaps and JPEGs. In this case, I've got all my blue tiles in this catalog here, and then we have over here picture proportions is 1:1. There's going to be no cropping in this case, and it also creates thumbs that is used for the calculation. Sampling 8 by 8, I think that would work fine. So then we need to put in a library name. And actually, if you just put a name here, that doesn't seem to work. You have to actually select a place for this to save as well. So you have to click on the dots. And here we are. And I'll just call this basic blue new. And press save. And then we press scan images, and it scans through them very quickly. And I'll press close. And then we can open image again. And let's do the same one again, of course. And this has not been, by the way, this has not been properly scaled for the Commodore 64 output. As you can see, it's 42 columns by 24 rows. I'll just put it now to 40 by 25, which is the correct one. And press apply. And then we can push render. So that is with the library that we just created. Another interesting function, by the way, once I'm here, is that you can also define that there shouldn't be any repeats of characters right next to each other. Of course, for the PETSCII effect, that is fine. It actually looks better when you do that. But for other things, you may want to add distance between them. Now I have duplicated the blank tiles, the blank dark blue and the blank light blue now for this one, so it will not look that different. And then I'll just do that again, and you can see now that you're getting a bit more variation in the background. I'll do distance 3 now, so that means the minimum distance between two of the same tile will be 3. And now it's looking like that. So that adds a little bit of a different flavor to it. I'll just put it down to 0 again. And it's something that can look better for some other projects. But for this particular style, a distance of 0 is right. So once here, of course, you can save this mosaic. Save mosaic to file, or you can also, if you want to do batch, which is what we want to do later, you go into batch mosaic and you can select all the images at the same time that you want to process. Right, so that is, I'll just save this now actually, just so I can show you how it looks in the finished one. And also you see here you get a question of size. I'm going to do it in 1920 by 1200, and I'll just do full quality JPEG and save as, and use the default. Open it, and you can see that looks much better. But still, this picture is not perfect. There is still some grading and cropping that needs to be done for this to look even better. So I'm just going to minimize that. Okay, so now I've showed you how to create the tiles, and I just quickly showed you a little bit of the image mosaic software. In DaVinci Resolve, I usually like doing the initial cropping and scaling of the images as well. So what I do is I go into project settings, and I want to change the aspect ratio to be the same as for the Commodore 64 basic screen, and that is 16 to 10, which is the same as 1920 to 1200. Let's see, I'll just change that. I'm not sure if I have to do that first actually. 1200, like so, and save, and that changes the aspect ratio here. And then I want to zoom out now so that this fills the screen at least, but then again I also want to crop in a little bit. And I'm going to do that now. So I'll just make sure that I'm sort of centered now. So I'm just going to do that and move down a little bit. I don't want to cut off my chin. I don't want to cut off my eyes. So I'll just move up a little bit more actually. So I can do like so. Let's see how that looks now. I can move down a little bit actually. And that is looking all right, because you want, if you have a tight crop on a face, of course, you get more detail, more facial expression rendered in the final video as well. So that's the end bit there, and yeah, I'm leaning forward a bit there, but that is okay. Okay, so there we are. That's a good crop, I think. And of course, adjusting the image to get a better result is also something you might do here. So if in the DaVinci Resolve you have the grading page, let's just have a little look at what this looks like now. So this looks like it's a little bit too much brightness there on my face, and of course the eyes are a little bit on the dark side, so you may want to reduce the range a little bit of the image. So I want to make it a little bit darker first of all, and then I want to have less contrast. Maybe something like that might work, not too much. Something like that, perhaps. Now the thing is, I'm going to do show you how to do this in Lightroom as well now. But the thing is, just to have a starting point, I'll try that and see how that works out. So that shouldn't be too bad actually. That might be fine. Right. So let's do the export from DaVinci Resolve now. So we go to the export page, and I'll just do file name. I'll call it tutorial. Location, I've already created a folder now that I wanted to use for it, and I call it tutorial TIFF. So I created a folder on my desktop that I want to use for the images. And now in export video, you have to go down here and change it to TIFF is what I'm using. So TIFF, 8 bits, and size. Now I've already done my cropping, so I don't need to use the full size TIFF images. Indeed, full size TIFF images take up a lot of space. So usually I reduce the size now to something closer to the final size. I like doing 480 by 300, for instance, is a good size. I could do going even up to 320 by 200 actually. Let's just try 320 by 200 now, see how that works. So and then we add to render queue, and then we get it up there and we press start render, and it will do the whole video. Right, so of course I forgot to grade the second part of the clip. One nice thing you can do in DaVinci Resolve is if you have one clip and you copy it, so you press Control or Command C, or you press copy up here, and you go to another clip, and you can go to edit and paste attributes. And then on this page, you can actually paste the parameters, that is all the color grading parameters, and you press apply, and then you get that clip as well with the same grading as the previous one. And now I have to export it again, unfortunately, but there you go. This is right up here as a ready export now, so that is quite useful. So I can do start render and render again. Right, that is done. So now I've got all I'll just put these folders that I made here now. So I've got one called TIFF, one called JPEG, and one called PETSCII. Now the reason I got one called JPEG is because in the batch processing of Mosaica, it does not accept TIFFs for some reason. There we go. Okay, so now I'll just open the TIFF folder and just open a random picture here now, and as you can see now it comes up with the correct aspect ratio. It actually is the correct number of columns and rows as well. 40 by 25 is 1000 tiles, is actually the default in Mosaica, and that is the correct for the Commodore 64. So I'm just going to press apply. I'm just going to close my previous one now, and then I'm going to press render, see what that looks like. And now that is really close to what I want. I think actually that is what I want. I'm quite happy with that. I don't need to do any further grading of it, I think, in this case, because I've tried to squeeze the image so it's a little bit more mid-tony, and I think that will look quite good. But when you're working on converting a film clip into this effect, of course, you may have to go cut by cut, and sometimes even inside a cut, you may have to do some adjustments over time as well. Because it doesn't always, one exposure doesn't always fit an entire cut in a scene. So that looks very good to me. So I would happily do the rest of them now. But I also wanted to show you how to do this in Adobe Lightroom. So I'm going to go into Lightroom and show you now. So this is, I'll just press import. I'm going to go to Windows, Users, Hakon, that's my name, and we've got desktop somewhere here, desktop, and we've got tutorial, TIFF, that is the one we want. And then we do import, and this takes a little while. This is one of the things I don't like about Lightroom, is it is very slow. It used to be a lot faster. Actually, I think all the Adobe programs used to be faster before they started using GPU acceleration, because that changed the architecture of the program significantly, and it became less optimized for not using, or for using the processor at the same time, it feels like. Now this is quite quick now because the images are quite small, and it's not that many of them. So there we are, that was actually not as bad as I thought. So what I would do in Lightroom, if I wanted to do adjustments here, I would go into the develop section and adjust exposure and contrast, etc. Manually here, and then I would copy that value to, so I would take this, if I don't want to do the whole thing, of course I would do Control A or Command A, but I also could do just, for instance, one cut needed to be selected. So if this, what we see here is was one cut of a scene, I would do like so. Actually, I would do like so. I would copy. So now I selected this whole line here, and then when that is selected, I select the one that has had the adjustments made to it, and then I can synchronize them all and select which things to synchronize. And then we press synchronize, and it copies the settings to the other images that are selected. A very important part of the process, of course, for more complicated things. This is a very easy scene. There's no complicated lighting or anything. I would export this to, just an export setting called desktop full size, and just exports it to desktop in full size, literally. And then I would open that with my test crop, and that is the one that's called tutorial there. That's the one here, and then I would render that just to see that it looks okay. And I would do this for different parts of the image sequence, different parts of the scene, to make sure that it all looked good, especially when there's movement within a cut where the lighting changes. I would do it on different parts of it just to make sure that it looked okay. So this still looks okay to me, and I'm going to just minimize this. And once I've done all the cuts of a scene, I've done the cropping, I've done the exposure, the contrast. Sometimes I would have recut as well a little bit, but if I want to get more focus on, for instance, on somebody speaking in a scene, like for instance when I did the clip from Commando, towards the end, it's a sort of mid-wide shot of Arnold Schwarzenegger talking to the air hostess, and as he starts speaking, I actually do a cut where I cut to his face rather than doing the mid-wide shot, things like that. So I'm going to export all these now, and I'm going to push export there, and the specific folder, and I'm going to put them in tutorial JPEG. And if I hadn't already sized them for the size that I want to use in my mosaic program, this is where I would have got into resize, and I would have put in 320 by 200 for instance, to resize them to speed up processing and also take up less space on my hard drive as well. So I'm just going to remove that, and then I'm going to press export. And now they should be popping up here in the folder called tutorial JPEG in a moment. There we are, and I'll just put that view on. Okay, so that looks fine. So if I've done any more processing in Lightroom, this is where, of course, that processing would be part of those images. Of course, they're not done yet. It takes a little while. It's 3,408 images is what makes up this image sequence now, which takes quite a bit of processing time in the Mosaic software in the end. I'll get back to the speed of this. I'll mention that later. Of course, the speed will depend on your processing power. I think Mosaica doesn't use that much of, I'm quite sure it's not multi-core compliant, so it only uses one core, I think, or one thread. If you find something else that maybe uses more than is multi-threaded, then it will be faster potentially. So in any case, a lot of the processing time is actually opening, closing and saving files, so there's a limit to how much faster it can get. So that is the main part of it. So now I've got these ready to process. So what I like to do next now, after I create the JPEGs for processing, is I like to copy all those, and I'll paste those into my folder called tutorial PETSCII now, which is the one I intend to use for the finished processed pictures. And I'll show you in a moment why I do that. The reason is I want to import the image sequence into DaVinci Resolve only once. If you don't do this, and if you want to import it to have a look and see how it's going, you have to re-import and remove and re-import the image sequence every time there are new images added to it. If you do it this way, every time that a new PETSCII image is created, it will replace the image already here, and so your image sequence will change inside DaVinci Resolve, and you can see what it looks like as you go along. So I'm going to import media now, and I'm going to go into tutorial PETSCII, and I'm going to select all with Control A or Command A, and I'm going to open. And then I'm going to place this on top here, like so. I'll just zoom in, make sure this is aligned. So now this is our processed, quite grainy, low resolution image sequence, which is the one we're sending to Mosaica. And now as these images are replaced by PETSCII, this will show up here. I don't have to do anything else to make sure that looks okay. And the nice thing about that is you want to see not just one image. Of course, when I'm doing this preview now, I'm just testing one image. The problem is that when you have a motion sequence, when you have a video, a movie, what you see isn't just stills. You see the combination of images working together and tricking your eye into believing it is a moving picture. And so the effect is quite different on a moving image as it is on a still. So this looks quite good as a still, which is a very good sign, but it doesn't always look that great in a still. And then when you create the movie, you see more detail than you can in a still picture. So now I'm going to do mosaic, batch mosaic, and I'm going to select my desktop and JPEG as my starting folder. There we are. And I'm going to, as an output, select my desktop and PETSCII folder. And then this is actually the right size, I think, that I use. I use 40 by 25 cells, and then I use 36 pixels size for each cell, which is a good size, I think. It doesn't take up much space anyway. So, and then I'm going to press mosaic all, and it will start working. Of course, first of all, nothing much happens because it's the fade in the beginning. So it's going to take a few moments here before we see anything interesting happening. Now the speed of this is not bad. I think, if I remember correctly, I get about 16 images per minute. And the actual processing time is very short there. It's just over 2 seconds, it looks like. Or 3.5 there, it said when it started. 3.4. Yeah, it looks like 3.4 seconds is the processing time. So most of the time is actually spent by the computer to open, to save and to close, rather than to process. And I get about 16 images per minute. Just going to leave this to process a little bit. It looks quite nice with the fade-ins actually on when you do this. So I like, if I remember, I don't always remember, I like doing the fade-ins. So I like creating a fade-in before I export the images and before I make the PETSCII, rather than fading in the PETSCII effect itself. Or rather than fading in the PETSCII video itself, I'm fading it in so that the PETSCII creates the fade-in. That looks a lot nicer, I think. Doesn't look too bad. Looks like I got this kind of detail I want, not too much contrast. And of course this is something that if you use it for this particular effect with these particular colors, you sort of get a sort of an eye for it after a while, what kind of effect it would have in the finished video, depending on how you expose it. And then it's nice just to see it as a video, do a bit of sort of test rendering and just see how it looks as a clip as well, and then you sort of get a feeling for how it is going to be in the end. So now I can start looking here, so you can see the beginning now is starting to turn into PETSCII, and the images are replaced as we go along, which is quite good. So there we are. And it's looking quite good so far, I think. So I don't think that I need to do any more adjustments, but of course when I'm working with things like when I was working with Singing in the Rain and the Blade Runner videos, I did have to go back and readjust exposure and contrast several times for different parts of the scene. Because once you see it in the moving version, sometimes you feel that you're lacking a little bit of detail. It's a little bit too bright, too contrasty, or too dark, and you want to make sure that you get the detail that you feel is relevant to the scene and the cut. And also sometimes I felt I went back and recropped as well a few things, or adjusted the crop anyway. And if you do that right, you still have exactly the same continuity in the PETSCII clip. And I'm sure that while I'm pointing this out now, that very few people actually noticed that I had recropped the scenes from Blade Runner in any way. But of course the crop was a lot tighter than it was in the original. The same was true for parts of the Commando scene as well. Singing in the Rain, that was also cropped in, but only by what was needed for the aspect ratio. So a little bit of the original frame did go away, but only because it had to for the aspect ratio. Another thing now, by the way, when I got to this stage, I can actually talk a little bit about what I do next. So now I got my PETSCII coming in here, but I also want to export this in a 16:9 ratio in the end. So I'm going to go to project settings again, and I'm going to go well, I'm just going to put that in there. So I'm going to go back to 1920 by 1080, press save, and then I want to import my, let's see, I got my desktop now, I've got my background, and I've also got my introduction video as well. I'll just put that in now while we're waiting for a few more images to come in. So I'm going to go to my edit page here, and I'm going to move these away, and I'm going to put in my, oh, that's a bit long, isn't it? Okay, let's make more space for that. And I'm sure there are easier ways to do this in DaVinci Resolve, by the way. This is how I do it. In fact, I should actually let's see. Well, technically now I don't need the original video anymore, so I can place this on top of that. This is just my plain background, so I can actually just do like so. And of course the reason you need that background is here. When you zoom out, of course you want that light blue background to be there, like so. So I'm going to move these over here. So now we have, see how that looks now. And then it goes into there, that looks quite good. So this takes a while. I'll just go and check now and see what kind of timings we have on our files now. So, for instance, let's see. This one started at 1455, and that is 1455 as well. Let's do those. So all these within 1 minute, that's 13 within a minute. So I'm just doing the 13. So it looks like we're getting 13 pictures per minute now. I think I got 16 before. I'm not sure what is different this time, but maybe it's it could actually be that I'm doing the screen recording and that is slowing things down actually. That is quite possible. So, oh, by the way, another thing, in different video programs, when you import an image sequence, it doesn't necessarily interpret that as having the same frame rate as your current project. So you have to make sure that the frame rates match. In DaVinci Resolve, of course, when you import a video, it will ask you whether to change the frame rate to the frame rate of the video you're importing. So now I've got the frame rate of the video clip here automatically come up, and then when I import it again, it will automatically think that the image sequence I imported is the same frame rate as the project, so it matches up perfectly. And you get exactly the same duration as the original video. Right, so then all that remains really is to wait for the processing to be done, which takes a while. And every now and again it's nice just to have a little look in the video sequence and just make sure that everything looks okay. If you find something that doesn't look okay and that you think is something that affects a bigger part of your video, it might be an idea to stop the batch and regrade as needed or recrop as needed, and then start over again. And of course, if the beginning of the video is still fine and you want to keep it the way it is, you can just remove those images from the source file directory and just put them somewhere else. You don't have to change the output directory. It will just overwrite things that have been done before. If you want to keep the output directory files as a backup in case something even worse happens, then of course you could copy those. But generally, when I do this, I don't need to do that. I just change the JPEGs that are not quite right. I remove the ones that I've processed that are right, or I create a separate directory that I call reprocess or PETSCII or something like that, and then I do those. Yeah, and that's it really. There's not much else to it. So, see, quite simple. A bit of elbow grease. Of course, this particular video isn't a big challenge to create in PETSCII. Once you have a film that is made often in a wider aspect ratio, like 2.35 to 1, for instance, you have to get quite creative sometimes with the way you crop it as well. And of course with things like Blade Runner, which is a very dark film, you have lots of deep shades and contrasty lights. It's a bit of a challenge trying to grade it properly for this process. If you film yourself, if you make films yourself that you want to use this process on, it would be possible, of course, to more or less automate the correct exposure for it. Of course, you can do a lot in your camera. You can make sure that you do some tests and find out what the perfect exposure is in your camera. And of course, you can also do the automated processing afterwards to be perfect for the effect. And of course, you can use this for anything else. It doesn't have to be PETSCII. You can use it for other effects. Indeed, I've used it for creating a typewriter video effect as well. So like it's like text art again, but it looks like it's been typed on a typewriter. So again, not something you can do with an ASCII converter actually, but you can do it with this method. Right, so that's how I do it. So did you enjoy watching that? Did you learn something new? Did you get some ideas for how you can do it in a more efficient way perhaps? Well, please let me know. Please leave a comment. Please like, share, subscribe, join me on Patreon, all those things. And thank you very much for watching. I will see you in my next video, and goodbye for now.